Let's jump to Kentucky a little bit here. Cole, we'll let you start us off again. We are running through the SEC. Last week we did Mississippi State. This week Kentucky. And man, what a fall from grace they had this year. Let's talk about them, Cole.
All right, so Kentucky was one of those teams that a lot of people bought into because of the 3-year span. You guys know the 3-year rule, right? Underneath Mark Stoops. Every 3 years, you get to 10 wins. Got 10 wins in 2018, got 10 wins in 2021. So 2024 was set up for a 10-win season. And there were moments where you look at this team and say, they really didn't look that bad. Defensively, they still had great talent coming back on in with Deion Walker. They brought in Pop Johnson from Georgia. Brock Vandagriff comes on in. He competed with Carson Beck. There was rumors that there was neck and neck battles of them duking it out for QB1 in Athens to replace Stetson Bennett. And then they proceeded to finish off the year 4-8. Their signature win came against Ole Miss in week 5. Big time play with the Berrien Brown catch for 46 yards on 4th and 5. And then they took a detour coming back home from Oxford, and they never got back on the wagon. Didn't win another SEC game. The only other game they won that year was against FCS Murray State. And so now a lot of change has come to Lexington. Some good, some bad. Here's the best part. They have portaled in ample talents. McKeese Grace, the Buck Buchanan Award winner from South Dakota, is the new star defensive lineman. I see a lot of Jared Verse in his game. And TJ, not to bring up Jared Verse because I know that he is a pride of yours, but remember when he was coming out of Albany, everyone was like, yep, got to get this kid. Got to bring in this kid because we think that he's special. I think that could be McKeese Grace. They've also added in a couple of really good defensive linemen like David Gusta from Washington State, Jaden Williams from Wyoming. True Edwards comes on in from Louisiana Tech after an 800-yard season last year for the Bulldogs. Kendrick Law comes on in from Alabama. Troy Stiletto, a former top 100 wide receiver, comes on in from Clemson. J.J. Hester comes on in from Oklahoma. They've rebuilt the offensive line once again via the portal, which I completely disagree with, but they had to find a way to do it. Josh Braun comes on in from Arkansas. Alex Wolschlager comes on in from Bowling Green. Evan Wimberly comes on in from Western Kentucky. Shiaz Pate comes on in after being an all-conference USA left tackle from New Mexico State. They also bring in a quarterback to bring in competition with Cutter Boley. Zach Calzada, his claim to fame, beat Nick Saban as an unranked Texas A&M roster. Here's the only problem when it comes to a guy like Zach Calzada. He has one speed as a quarterback. 5-yard slant route, coming in as a piss missile. 50-yard blast down the field, coming in as a piss missile. Couple of key departures. Berrien Brown stays in the SEC and goes to LSU. Dane Key goes on over to Nebraska. You're welcome, Lincoln. Deion Walker, Pop Johnson, Maxwell Harrison, Octavius Oxendine, J.J. Weaver. 3 starting offensive linemen, Demisumo Karungbe and Alex Rayner, have all left for the NFL draft. Transfers, 19 come on in, 22 depart. They did bring in some pretty good names via the recruiting cycle. Top 25 finish for them, including 4-star safety Martellus Carter, 4-star safety DeMarcus Gardner, 4-star offensive lineman Darian Slay, 4-star tight end Mikkel Skinner, and 4-star cornerback Andrew Purcell. Both will be in on campus after the spring window. 22 total recruits. Key games this year that I'm watching for. September 6th against Ole Miss. Ole Miss is foaming at the mouth because if they don't lose that game, they're in the college football playoff. And for my money, Ole Miss would have been the most dangerous team of the SEC rosters that could have gone on a run and actually won the whole damn thing. They play them in week 2. Week 4 against September 27th, they travel for their first SEC road game against South Carolina. That was the moment where last year, a lot of people with South Carolina started to believe in the North Stars a little bit. That week 2 game. October 18th against Texas. It's their first game coming off of bye. October 25th against Tennessee. November 22nd at Vanderbilt, potentially their biggest and most winnable game. And they close out the season on November 30th, I believe it is. Yeah, November 30th against Louisville. What are the expectations out in Lexington? For my money, make a bowl game. Like honestly, at this point, when we talk about a team like like Kentucky, there used to be the laughingstock of the SEC. Like, as bad as Vanderbilt was, before Mark Stoops arrived, they were a joke. And they were coached by a guy named Joker Phillips, but nobody brought in conversations about Kentucky being anything. And then the expectations was, okay, maybe every few years we get to 8-4, and then they get to 10 wins. And now we got to get back to the reality of what Kentucky is. They're a program that is going to lose talent to the transfer portal. They're not going to land premier names that we will see at Florida State and Alabama and Ohio State. They're going to land guys that come from the SEC. I mean, that come from Conference USA, come from the Sun Belt, come from the Mountain West. That's going to be what they land. in terms of talent. So how do you develop that talent that eventually becomes standard names and gets a few upset wins? Double your win total from the SEC in your this upcoming season. So win 2 games. Beat Ole Miss, beat Vanderbilt, beat Auburn, beat Tennessee, beat Florida, beat Vanderbilt. Like, that's what you're looking for if you are a team in Kentucky. Get to 6-6. And I think the other thing is get back to the part of where Mark Stoops is the guy. Because Mark Stoops has the best contract in college football. I will die on this take. What the expectations are for him to get paid, how much he is, as a top 15 paid head coach, are realistic. Kentucky fans aren't saying, hey, every few years you got to be in the college football playoff run. No, they're saying go 7-5, 8-4, make a bowl game, win that game, get an upset win, and continue to recruit at a top 25, 30 level. And we'll pay you a buttload of money, and you'll be happy. And he's done that so far. But when he got the job offer at Texas A&M, and then the Greg Schiano 2.0 shit happened to where he was eventually brought back to Lexington, I think that there was a lot of buyout from the locker room, that he wasn't fully invested. People kind of realized he is looking to greener pastures. He's realized he's kind of hit his ceiling at a place like Kentucky. So can you get that buy-in right now? And if you can't, well, then what needs to change to where Kentucky gets back to being this program that gets a 7-5 finish, maybe wins a bowl game, constantly is finishing in the top 30 of transfer portal and recruiting rankings with a coach that wants to be there? If the buy-in can't be sustainable right now with Mark Stoops, unfortunately, I feel like that he is on the hottest seat. And their schedule's daunting. Their schedule is a train wreck. And the way that their roster is built right now, I think they could go 4-8. I think they could go 7-5. I think they could go 3-9 and be the worst team in the SEC. But you got to get the buy-in, I think, from Mark Stoops if you want to truly be a team that people are saying they're trending in the same direction that they need to be in this new version of the SEC.
Do you think that how much of it you mentioned the getting the A&M, that falling through, whatever? How much of it is he just needs a fresh start? Like, is he past his prime, or is it he needs a fresh start? Everybody needs kind of a, hey, we need a breath of something new.
Hey Tom, when is Kirk Ferentz going to retire? Anytime soon?
Never.
Because the second that he's gone, Stoops is on a plane back to his alma mater. Like, that is a done deal, in my opinion. But it's a fresh start, yes, but also at the same time, here comes the negative of that, TJ. His contract is incredible. I mean, if you guys really look at Mark Stoops getting paid how much he does at a place like Kentucky, why would you ever want to leave that job? Especially when you know what the realistic expectations are out at Kroger Field. It's not like that you have to be able to make the jump the way Oklahoma does or the way that Auburn's expectations are. It's, hey, 8-4, an upset top 25 victory, and 500 in the SEC. We'll pay you $9.5 million. We'll pay you $8 million. Like, nobody wants to move off of that contract. So if he were to leave, he's probably taking a pay cut. And he's probably going to go to another school to where maybe the expectations are even lower or they're higher, but it's going to be less money. So if Iowa calls and they say, hey, Ferentz is gone, you want to come home? I think he's on that plane tomorrow and the SEC has to find a new head coach. But if that doesn't happen, unless he's fired, I'm not sure that he's leaving anytime soon. Now, he could be fired or he could even resign, especially if the buy-in is not there. But at that point, I think that's the last case scenario. Like, hey, we want you to end things on your terms. Instead of firing you, we're going to let you resign.
How much do you think the turnover at offensive coordinator has hurt them? Am I making, I mean, obviously Cohen was here in Tampa and now in Jacksonville. Like, just thoughts on, is that as big of an issue as you talked about the A&M 2.0, Schiano 2.0 thing?
Nah, I want to say it is, but I also don't think it is because of, they had Cohen. They got to the 10-win season. Cohen goes back to the NFL. They bring in, who was it? Rick Scringaleo, I think that's how you say his name, from the NFL. They suck. You see regression from Will Levis. He comes back. And then there's still regression from Cohen with Devin Leary as a starting quarterback. And Leary was a good player at NC State for years. And I just thought, okay, maybe it needed a change. I really liked him more than I liked Brock Vandagriff coming on in. But Bush Hamden did have play calling experience from when he was at Boise State. Because remember, he was underneath Spencer Danielson. And when Spencer Danielson took over for Andy Avalos, he still was calling the plays on offense. So I think that was a big deal in a transition. But also, I just think that the offensive line was a bigger problem. I think the way that they've been not recruiting and they've been portaling in players on the offensive line has been a bigger negative surrounding Kentucky than the actual play designs because they've had weapons. I mean, Jamori Macklin, who comes on back this year, I think can have a breakout season. I really like True Edwards. He's a 6-year senior. He had a great season last year at Louisiana Tech. I think he could be a standout. But I think more so it's the offensive line communication. And here's the thing. In the SEC, and you know this as well as I do, Tom, you got to be built to have a stable offensive line. If you do not have offensive line and you don't develop offensive line, you're probably going to be trending down every single offseason.
It's been a while since Kentucky felt like they were credible in that department as well. Benny Snell was the last time. I remember them upending Penn State in the Cotton Bowl, or not the Cotton Bowl, Camping World Bowl.
Camping World. It was a Camping World. Yeah.
Yeah, I forget what the name of the bowl game was, but yeah, I mean that was the bread and butter. It felt like for Mark Stoops for the longest time. So it just feels like Kentucky isn't the most desirable job, even though it's in the SEC. It's not the best area in terms of going to recruit. You're kind of in the middle of no man's land, and you do have to really work to go to states like Texas, Florida, the Tidewater. You're getting to Mississippi and New Orleans and Louisiana a little bit. So you're close, but you're not that close. So I don't know. It feels like Mark Stoops probably isn't really on the hot seat. I think he should be to the common fan, but I think Kentucky's probably not going to move on from him.
The thing with a place like Kentucky, it's not the same as Auburn or Oklahoma, where you're hearing how Brent Venables doesn't do this year. He could be gone. Hugh Freeze, you portaled in really talented players. You got a quarterback. You got 3 quarterbacks. Your schedule's manageable. If you're not 8-4, you're pretty much gone. That's not the expectations there. But also, who's the coach that comes on in? John Summerall's name has been thrown around because he has connections to the program. There was rumors that he was going to be the front runner for the job if Stoops took the job last year at Texas A&M and he didn't get fired. But if you're John Summerall, what makes you say, I'm just going to hold out for a job in the ACC? Or I'm going to hold out for a job like Florida if it ever opens up, or Oklahoma if it ever opens up? Because at Tulane, I'm bringing in really good players. They're leaving in the offseason to go to bigger schools, but we have a manageable schedule every year. I'm probably going to play against one Power 4 opponent, and we have a shot to go to the college football playoff. When I go to a place like Kentucky, 7-5, 8-4, that's what I can expect. And then is that a stepping stone job for me and not my dream job? 2 quick things I want to get to real fast. The X factor for this team is going to be the offensive line. They allowed 37 sacks last year. I don't care if Cutter Boley's starting. I don't care if Zach Calzada's starting. If you do not have protection against some of these SEC defensive lines, you are in a world of hurt. And the X factor player, the breakout player that I'm really excited to see is Jamarian Wilcox, the running back. He had 2 games of over 100 rushing yards last year, including a career day against Tennessee. I think with Demisumo Karangbe now leaving for the NFL and Chip Trainum leaving to go to a different school, I think he went to where did he go? Ball State or Central Michigan. I don't know. He went to a G5 program. It's going to open up opportunities for him now to be the lead back. They brought in Dowell from Nebraska. I think he could be a change of pace running back. But I really like what I saw from Wilcox last year. 6.4 yards of play, only had 2 rushing touchdowns. But I think the upside for him is, much like you were saying, Tom, not Benny Snell, not Chris Rodriguez, but definitely one of those players who we're talking about getting 800, 900, maybe even 1,000 rushing yards.
Not to the running joke on this show is probably going to be how I tie everything back to Florida State. But do you know where Stoops was before he was at Kentucky?
I don't know. Where was he? Was it Oklahoma? No, it was at Florida State.
So I wonder if in recruiting, some of those ties that he had, because I didn't think about this until Tom brought it up, kind of being in the middle of nowhere, very tough place to recruit. It's also Kentucky. I wonder if some of those ties really helped him in the early to middle parts of when he was at Kentucky, because he had those ties in the state of Florida. He had those ties with those high school coaches and guys that he was recruiting. And they did. They recruited really well some years. And so I wonder if that accounts for some of the level of drop-off, is the further away you get from it, how well does he still have those ties? Or anyone, right? You think about Summerall going there. If it's almost like at a place like Kentucky, and sorry for any Kentucky fans that are listening to this, but it's almost like if Summerall goes there, I think he would get a bump from being in Louisiana and being in New Orleans, and he would get but that only, I think, lasts for so long, right? Mm-hmm. Unless he turned them into an Ole Miss, right? That is competing and really nationally known. And there's the buy-in and NIL and all that stuff. But I almost think you, at a place like Kentucky, you almost have to, like he tried to do with A&M, strike while the iron's hot. Like go out at your peak, because the further away you get from that, the harder it is to consistently do it. I don't know. Maybe that's a crazy take.
No, that's the thing. That's the thing with a guy like Mark Stoops or any coach that goes to Kentucky. It's a program that right now is viewed as a stepping stone.
Yeah.
Like a guy like Mike Leach going to Starkville was, in my opinion, the final stop for him. Like if he was 35, he probably would have looked for another job. Mm-hmm. A place like Kentucky, I think that Mark Stoops at this point is holding out because of number one, he's getting paid a buttload of money, and he's waiting for Iowa to open up. And until one of those two things happens, he's there or he's fired. But the next coach that comes on in, they're going to view it as a stepping stone job. It's not resourced the way that the way Ole Miss is. It's not resourced the way South Carolina is. It's not resourced the way that Missouri is. And Tom brought up a really interesting point when it comes to recruiting. People kind of forget that Texas and Oklahoma now are in the SEC. They were already recruiting at a top 20 level with the Big 12 logo. Now they get the blue and the yellow attached to their name and that big SEC brand. That's going to take away from programs like Arkansas, Mississippi State, Kentucky. They no longer have that pull of, hey, we're in the SEC. We play on the biggest stage. Well, now Texas and Oklahoma do as well. And guess what? Their fan base is better. Their NIL collectors are better. And they're much more resourced to be able to say, we punch out NFL talent on the regular. If I'm Mark Stoops, though, the only thing I'm really looking for this year, stability. Like, I just want stability at this program, knowing that this team can be competitive. And by the way, when you have an opportunity to pull off an upset win, don't punt on fourth down in your own territory against the number one team in the country. I have still not forgiven him, and I hope that most fans in Kentucky haven't forgiven him. Hey, thanks for watching The Power 2. If you like this type of content, make sure you hit subscribe and check out some of our other videos found here on the channel.